Like I said, the subject is wide. It seems that humans for a long time have been interested in the troubling aspect of living a personal life and the decisions that they have to make about the future. And it's so opaque, so dark. We don't know about the future, so people become very ingenious, find ways to get information about the future and trying to get information any way they can. And so they set up many different forms of divination across the nations, across religion, and individuals even. And they want to see the future or discover something that's hidden from everybody else. They want to know it. So when I went online, I started to look, and I went to Wikipedia just to get some guidance. And I found that on Wikipedia, they had listed at least 400 different types of divinations as practiced. Everything from baby crawling across the floor. Did you know that was a divination? You can watch a baby cross the floor, and people can divine what the child will be like. Other things too, but there's just hundreds and hundreds of ways to do it. And so I'm going to have a slide presentation of a few of them, and then we can have a little discussion about when we look at the slide and read a little bit about it. And then I have a TEDx talk about why is divination so worldwide? Why is it throughout history, every society, every group of people that's ever lived had diviners, the people who practiced divination. Ever since we can go back historically, there has been divination. How is that? What is it about the humans that makes that so interesting and workable? So we're going to look at that after we're done here. The first one is aromancy. And mancy is a word for divine, divination. And so if you have necromancy, this is aromancy, and it's divination of the state of the air. And you don't think that's common, but it is. Why are we so interested in the weather report, weather weathermen? Because it has to do with the atmosphere disturbance of the air. You have to watch the clouds to see if the weather's changing. People divine the shapes of the clouds over a certain area, even birds and precipitation. Of course, we could say that weather forecasting was sort of a mild form of divination, but they wouldn't accept that. But it's for sure that, in my experience, because I come from a Pentecostal background, and the Pentecostal people, when they want to say something, they look at the weather report, and you know why that we have tornadoes in Florida, and we have hurricanes, on the Texas coast, and earthquakes. It's because God, they divine it and say it's God's action against gay people, against women having the right to vote, against black people having any kind of rights. So religious people, when you tell them this, that's a form of divination, to read the weather and say this is why, and even read the mind of God. Very interesting. Anybody ever have any other experience when it comes to weather? If you know people or things you've done when it comes to the air and weather? Have you ever heard of the divination by kites? Many, especially in the Orient, build kites, and they watch them as they float, and the angle, and the area, and how high they get, how fast they rise, and they divine the building of kites. And so there's another area has to do with the air and weather. So when the next time you hear the Christian will get on, and it won't be long, it just takes a matter of time for somebody to blame the weather. They divine the weather and say this is why so-and-so's happened. because of the winter. But not so. Then alluramancy has to do with, allura is a word that means flour, or things that you cook with, food. It generally means flour, which is not the only use of words like laurel, which refers to flour with high gluten content. But generally, food is a widely used for divination. You see, I got a picture of one of the most divinating foods that we have in our society. And you tell people who go to a Chinese restaurant and open a fortune cookie and tell them that we're practicing divination, they might look at you really, really crazy. Because it's so ingrained in our society, or of course in American society, but in Chinese society too. You crack open a fortune cookie, why? To get just some fortune to tell you how it's going to be in the future. Is that interesting or not? Astrogalomancy. This is the divination by throwing objects onto the ground. It comes in several forms. I've got the one that we're really familiar with, and this goes back hundreds, thousands of years. The throwing of dice, or stones, or bones were initially used. Bones of different shapes, and then they got where they put different symbols on them, and they would take them to a shaman, and he would throw them on the ground and give you a reading from the bones that were thrown on the ground. And the bones changed it. I guess there are still people that do use bones. I'm not that illiterate to how some of the magic has gone on today, but I'm sure that there are some groups that still use bones of different sizes and shapes. But another thing is the idea of taking and throwing sticks on the ground. Just taking sticks from a tree, breaking them off randomly, and depending on the tree, depending on its location, depending on the magic maker or reader, break sticks off, take them, and then throw them on the ground. How they land, they make a reading out of it. And of course, you know about the all famous that millions and millions of Americans do it every year at Super Bowl. Who's going to get the ball? What do?
Flip a coin.
They flip a coin and it hits the ground. Practicing divination, right? Yeah. How widespread is that? I say it's pretty widespread, but too. Now, even today, form of divination that I practice even today at Kroger parking lot. I have practiced twice, and I don't know where I learned to do this, but I was taught. I got out of the truck, got out, looked down, and there was a coin laid down. You know what the first thing I said to myself? Is it hands up or is it hands down? So I looked down, it was hands up, and so I had a good feeling. You know, I picked it up because that means hands up means he was have a good day. Well, then I came back out and got in the truck, and there was another penny, and I looked at it, and it was the opposite up. So I picked it up anyway. But you see, have you ever done that?
I have found tails of coins, and I put them over and left them. So the next person who came along would get a shot of feel-good hormones if they found something heads up.
Yeah. What's some other things
That's nice.
that you can throw on the earth? Some people just take earth, throw it on a clear surface, and read the earth. Like it spreads out and you see the pattern it makes.
So runes would come under this too.
What now?
Runes.
Yeah.
Explain what a rune is.
Runes in Norse mythology or religions, they're little, they could be pieces of, they could be gems, coins, bones, anything, but they got little symbols on them. Runic symbols, or the symbols are called runes. And they mean different things.
You got some, so you can show some. But the throwing of objects onto the ground and then reading them is a form of divination. Has anybody ever practiced that here? We all have it. If we picked up a coin on the ground, or if we flipped a coin. Bibliomancy. This is a divination by books, writings, scripts. The Bible is a good example of this because in my church, preachers used to do it all the time. But it goes back hundreds of years. As long as there's been books or writings, people have practiced book divination. And you know how this works. Have you ever seen, well, in our church, preachers used to do this a lot. But they'd say the Spirit was moving, so they'd pick up the Bible and they'd hold it like this, and it'd fall open. And then they would close their eyes and then go like this. And that was a voice from the Spirit to preach from that scripture or to read that scripture at that time. And so that's how it works. Your future, the future of that pastor's sermon, instantaneously available for him. How magical is that? But other books, other things do that. People like to do it with a dictionary or love letters. It goes on and on where you can just, any kind of writing, you can use it as a divination tool for you. You do it all the time. Cartomancy. Of course, we all know this, but I didn't know the history of cartomancy. But it was done earlier, it was 500, 600, 700 years ago. They used, when playing cards were invented, they used playing cards. King, queen, jacks, all those, the numbers, they were used to people fortune telling. But then people got and said, well, this is real or something. So they created then tarot cards following the, I think, well, tell me, there are 52 cards in the deck and 2 jokers. How many tarot cards are they different? Tarot cards are 78?
72.
72 tarot cards. But the principle's the same. Whether you use plain cards.
Can I show you how to make that bigger, please?
Pardon?
Can I show you how to make that bigger, please?
No, I wish I could.
She said she can show you. I can show you.
That's why I made a card.
Move to the front row.
There's a way that we would view it. Up here is going to say the word slash it.
No, you're actually showing.
And now
actually
you'll
showing
see your arrow on it.
And then it'll go like that? Okay, thank you. See, I'm not too smart when it comes to computers. I had to learn growing up with computers. I'm sorry.
I worked with a lady, and she was about a decade older than me. She was super Christian. But she also knew how to read playing cards like we do tarot. And her grandmother had taught her. Now, again, these were Christians. The whole family was. But that wasn't a problem for them.
Well, the thing is with Christians with divination, if it,
The thing with Christians is they
if
can choose what they want on any
right,
given
if it
day.
encroaches upon their belief system of God, then it's of the devil. If it takes any power away from them, their authority away from their presence, if they become subservient to you, then you're of the devil. And they'll mark you like that. But that's how it works. Simple as that. They want power. And as long as playing cards are, why not? So, and you know that old saying, if it's in the cards, it's inevitable? That's where that comes from. It's how ingrained is that in our. Now we're going to talk about scrying. I'm sure everybody knows about scrying. That's seeing or peeping is what it really means. Into the future. To receive messages or visions that could be used as personal guidance for anyone. There's all prophecies, revelations, inspirations. And of course, have you ever watched Disney movies? What's a popular theme of Disney movies?
Crystal balls.
Crystal balls, what else?
Fire.
Who looked into the mirror?
Oh, Maleficent? No.
Well, yeah, Maleficent. She was with the wicked queen.
Cinderella.
What is the fairest of the
she looked into the queen and
Snow White?
asked, who's the fairest of the land in the mirror?
Snow White.
Actually talked to her.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of us all?
And so you see, this divination is not so far away. How long has Disney been around? 70 years? Maybe 20s? 90 years? They've been around. And Snow White was made in 1930s. How many young children have been brought up, taught about divination? And parents, Christian parents, that just let their children enjoy that work of the devil as part of entertainment. What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that? So they complain a lot, but they complain too much in my attitude.
Now that you mention it, as far as Disney,
Ursula.
it's only the evil villains and the witches that are ever,
Ursula has crystal ball.
You what now? What'd you say?
they don't ever have the good guys looking in the crystal ball.
It's always evil.
It's
Well,
always-
no, Tiana, the old, she looks in her gumbo pot. She is not a bad guy.
A frog prince. Is that the lady?
The old woman
That's the.
is not a bad guy, but she looks into her gumbo pot.
Mm-hmm.
She reads her gumbo pot.
And this is Pixar, not Disney, but that movie Brave, the
About that.
Scottish movie,
That's the-
there was a witch in it, but she wasn't necessarily evil.
But I don't recall her
But
scary.
you see your scribe, and your scribe is anything you can look into, like a clear lake, a clear pool. If you can see, that's why some people can look, some people divine by looking into the reflection in a pool of water. And you remember in The Lord of the Rings, where Lady Galadriel, and she had a pool, she had a fountain, and she had Frodo look into it to see the future. How widespread was that message to our children? It's what, 20 years, 25 years now?
And they were good guys.
And they were good guys. Galadriel was a good witch. Oh, I know she was a witch. She wasn't a witch. She was a fairy. That's a whole different area of magic, fairies, and what they can see. But it's the whole idea of
Is that where
looking at scribe.
we get called the Lady of the Lake?
Lady of the Lake is from the Arthurian legends.
That's where she rises in the middle of the lake, if I understand the story. That's where Arthur threw, that's where the sword that Arthur looked for, the magic sword. And it was in the middle of the lake, and she would rise it up out of the middle of the lake to show that it was still available to those willing to.
There is another common movie that I remember that had an example of this in it. Did y'all ever see Cold Mountain? There was a part in it where Nicole Kidman is looking at a whale, looking at reflections in a whale. But I think the way they did it was she had to lean backward over the whale and hold a mirror up, and she was seeing some
Oh, I vaguely
reflection in
remember that,
the
but
water behind her. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, but that's also an old legend in Ireland, that if you, there's certain wells in Ireland that have the legend that if you can see into the well through a mirror. So it might have been in a movie, but it's an actual legend in certain
Well,
places.
a lot, the area that this movie was set in has a lot of Irish and Scottish people who settled
What
there.
other things are you aware of that you can divine that you peer into? You know crystal balls. You can look into
In
those.
the Middle Ages, I think it's like Nostradamus and people, they would often have, they didn't have crystal balls, they would have like a pot with water
Right.
in their,
Any container that contains a
Whatever.
reflective liquid that you can focus on, I'm sure could be used in divination.
I make black mirrors for scrying.
What's that all about?
They're just black mirrors that you can look into and
You look at-
scry.
Okay, and you get a reading from the blackness?
Mhm.
I see.
I did the same thing. I took a picture of frame apart and painted the back of the glass, put it back together.
Yeah.
I don't know, I always remember people reading
But
flames.
how does that work though?
I
You
tell
make
you
scar
another,
mirrors.
I tell you another one that's spooky in it. It just, and it's only because I've never been in a place except a museum or art gallery where you can look into a picture, photo or a picture, and find a message or inspiration. And all these pictures here and on this wall, there is something in divination about these pictures. Each one of these pictures tell a story of these people. And there used to be a time before photography was commonplace that people actually took pictures of the dead people that died in their families, locked them up, opened their eyes, and dressed them up, and had a photographer come in and photograph them as if they were alive, so that they could look at those photos and be magically, what's the word I'm looking for? What would happen to you if you had a picture of your dead deceased people around the house? And you looked at them for inspiration, for encouragement. Some of the stuff that we do, we don't realize could be divination. But actually, people thought that they actually caught your spirit. Some of the photography first came out, that they were afraid to have their pictures taken. They were afraid that they captured your spirit and you were trapped in that photo. Did you know that?
Yeah.
So,
Have you ever noticed there, like, sometimes pictures from the early days of photography, people long dead, it's like, it's uncanny sometimes looking at their eyes. They seem so intense, like there's something coming through from them.
That's the thing I feel. When you look at it, you go first for the eyes. You first go to the face, and then you go to the eyes to see if there's a living presence in that dead photo. Sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't, depending on the individual and can look at those photos. That's why if you take it, I had an aunt that could do this. She'd look at photos and she could tell you about the dead people, and she never met them. I don't know how she did it. I mean, I've been around people that do that, but she had this sense that she could, and she'd say, "I just know." She was one lady that when I was around her, because she would go like this. Sometimes you would sit with her and everybody be quiet, enjoying, and she'd go, "Whoa!" like this to you, and that meant that if you were a group of people on the porch and swing, whenever you stopped swinging, everyone was to be quiet, because she was having something, she would say things were passing through her. That's what she would say. And sometimes they abided in her, and sometimes they just passed through her, but she would just scream, like, not scream, but grunt or groan, as though something was going through. Her name was Jean, Aunt Jean.
Have you come across in any of these anything like a couple of times in the last year I've had it's an odd thing, and I don't know about divination, but like just clothes thrown on a blanket or something on a bench or a chair, and like I'll turn over and I'll look at it, especially it happens in my room all the time. It's like one time there was just stuff thrown on a bench, and it's like it formed like an ancient looking native mask, like an African, it reminded me of African native mask things, and it stayed there. I thought, this has got to be just a illusion. I left it there for days. Every day I got time I looked at it, it looked like it. And more recently, just some shirts I threw on a chair, I turned over and looked, and it formed clear as day, the head and jaw of a dragon.
That's interesting. And the gentleman that's going to talk after we're through these slides can talk about that. But I see that sometimes if you go into a restroom or somewhere where you're sitting and you're waiting for somebody, or you're in your restroom and you have to look at the wall and it's printed fabric on the wall, all of a sudden I see things in the wallpaper. It's not there, really, but I see them and I dwell on them. figures of head, or a man or a woman, and what's that all about, Alfie? Am I divining something from that wallpaper? Yeah,
I see faces and
yeah.
tiles
But anything,
and clouds
like you're throwing blankets, anything you
prints
throw
and
that's
things like
random,
that.
you can divine it. There's divination on it. Then we come to candles, which have been around a couple thousand years anyway. I don't know the history of candles. Anybody know when the first candle was created? Anybody know? I really don't know. I don't know the history of candles, but they go back hundreds, if not at least 1,000 years. And this is one of the divinations I didn't know, that candles back in the Dark Ages were used, were molten, and they poured them into cold water, and they would spread out, and they would divine the shape for people who would bring a candle to the shaman, or to it was even practiced in the Catholic Church, I understand. That they bring a candle, they light it, and then they would just drip the wax on the water, cold water, and read how it spread out. Has anybody ever done that? I see one hand shaking there. So, and another one has to do with the flame that's in a candle. A lot of people, this is why that sometimes Christians, at least the Christians in my church, would not let their children watch a burning candle. Because, they said, believe it or not, that in the flame was the eye of Satan. And it could, if you gazed at it, then the spirit from that flame could affect the mind of the child. Now, how crazy is that? But people believe that, actually. Staring into candles could actually affect psychologically the children. So, but that has to do with fire in general. And I didn't bring one on fire because it was mentioned with candles, but you can do it with a campfire. Have you ever sat around a campfire and have people divine a campfire, or the embers in a fire? And not only talking about fire, but the fire of the sun, and this goes back to weather too. How caught up are we with rainbows? The fire of the sun, that how it reflects in the atmosphere. We see rainbows and other. What just this past week, people were amazed at the northern lights that they could see all the way down the middle of the United States. Anybody get to see them?
Mm-hmm.
The aurora borealis, though, is usually considered a bad omen by native people.
They used to, yes.
What did you just say?
So the aurora borealis is usually considered a
Northern
bad
Lights?
omen by
The
native
Northern
people.
Lights?
The
Yeah,
Northern
Northern
Lights.
Lights.
They were in the news all this week because people could see them.
And
They're an
in a
omen
way,
of, what did you say?
it's a,
It's that omen.
yeah.
But people that didn't know any better thought they were spirits. And in fact, there was even a novel written about that, about people that lived in the Northern Lights. What was the name of that? Neil Gaiman wrote about, remember that the people that lived in the Northern Lights, and the polar bears that were soldiers and took care of the little girl that lived in them.
Golden Compass.
Yeah, the Golden Compass. So there was a lot of magic and mystery about the Northern Lights. And rainbows, of course, too. They're legendary. And so, what's at the end of the rainbow?
Pot of gold.
Oh, a pot of gold or whatever. Will you ever get it? No. But when people didn't know, leprechauns and what's the evil leprechaun? There's a name for those. Anyway, a lot of that to go on.
It's a sign that's listed in the Bible, too, one of several.
Yeah, well, then you got the rainbow, and of course, gay people took over the rainbow. They didn't take it over; they just claimed it as a part of their existence as human beings. They didn't claim anything. They didn't attach anything evil, satanic about the rainbow. But now, because again, we make this observation that if Christians feel threatened, they're willing to throw the rainbow in league with Satan. Go figure. It's a crazy world, isn't it? course, now we have good palm reading. How many's ever had your palm read? I have. How accurate was it? It was pretty good. So, palm reading is another way of divination. And the soles of the feet are another one. Anything, and generally this falls in with the physiology of the body. That how we can read. You ever heard people that can heard of divination where they can feel bumps on your head? Phrenology.
I was going to say, what was the name of that? I couldn't remember the name of it.
And they can do it. And certain people can divine, have divination about you. I'm reading the knots on your head. I don't know if I've got any knots on my head. I guess I don't have any hair, but I probably have a few knots. How many's ever had a phrenology? No, I haven't either. So, but other things too that have to do with the body. I can't think of any right off the, but palm reading, knots on your head, and some people said here, according I wrote this down here, says some people that do, it's called chiromancy is what the name for palm reading is. But some people look for pigmentations on the hands and on your arms, which signal a pact with Satan and the devil. Just by reading your liver spots, or moles, where they're at on your body, depending on where they're located and how many you have, and numerology gets involved. So, I have a lot, so I would be an interesting study for somebody who did that. Of course, we've already talked about casting lots, and that means to throw things. And so this is kind of but we were talking about a coin, and but any kind of stick, coins, dice, what else can you throw? Anything on the ground. Some people throw letters on a table, the alphabet on the table, just throw them on the table, and then they go like this. They're led to pick out letters. Anything's called casting blots is another thing. But the coin throwing is prevalent in our society. And it's okay by most if not all religions. I think the only religion that probably would have a problem with that would be Jehovah's Witnesses. And anything that smacks of any kind of thing that has to do with divination or magic, they ain't for it. So that's why most holidays, if you're Jehovah's Witnesses, are out. Now here's an interesting about rings. Why we have such a fascination with rings. The wedding ring. You know the purpose of the wedding ring is to protect the bride. I don't even know where it came from, but it came from divination. That there's a special vein or nerve that goes from this finger that goes to the heart. And the ring of gold is to protect the bride in marriage. Did you know that? There's other things that go along with that. Wearing the wedding ring. That's where it came from. But the thing that they said here is that they take a ring and hang it on a string and send it over a table of letters in a circle, and just set the ring there. And if it works right, the ring will move. Has anybody done this? Move. It will move to letters. It will spell us almost like a Ouija board, but it doesn't have human contact, my indication, what I read about. And that would be something to behold if someone has that ability, or that ability wherever it comes from, to be able to do that. Just hang a ring and let it sway.
I have with me one of those boards you're talking about. It's in the truck.
A ring board?
It's a circular board with letters and stuff on it.
That would be an interesting.
I can't recall the details, but I read something last week that every finger represents something different in our practice.
Right. And that's why people.
For a ring.
And actually, there's a whole study of that, magical study about rings on fingers and on toes too, because they have to do with the body.
What's a tumbler? What do you mean by tumbler?
A question, well, it says sometimes it's tumblers, they set it with a table wrapping and with tumblers on the table with the ring. And they watch the ring and it moves, and I guess, I've never seen this done, so I'm not experienced this. A question is posed to the ring, and the number of times that the ring strikes the side of the tumbler that's set on the table is interpreted as being an answer of some sort. So it's almost like a Morse code from outside the...
I've seen my great aunt one time. I was 10, 11, 12 years old. She did that, had the ring with, and had my cousin was laid on like Granny's couch, and she would hold it up, and if it went one way it was a boy, and if it went the other way it was a girl.
See, there's another way to do
And I've
that.
seen her do that.
No, I've heard of that.
So, and the way I learned it was if it went up, down, it was a girl. If it went left, right, it's a boy. But if
Oh, yeah.
it circled, the child would not survive.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Well, another lady I worked with demonstrated the same thing. She did it over wrist. She would suspend a sewing needle, and whichever way
I remember
it
the
swung.
sewing needle being done to me. Said I had 4 girls.
Well, I know I saw her. She had her to take her wedding band off, and they did it. Said something about it being her wedding band and the baby in her belly. That would.
Is that right?
I remember that because I thought that was weird. It was neat though, because sure enough, they said that it was going to be a boy, and actually she had 2 boys. She had twins. I remember that because I thought that was so neat. But you know, it was like one of those. Well, that's just, that's just the old wise tale. And
I had the needle done. I was supposed to have 4 kids, all girls, because that's what that one's supposed to do.
Is that
And then I
right?
had the ring on the belly, and girl passed away, girl.
Is that right? Well,
I know that, but the other people, the other ladies, were going, shh. That's just a wise tale. It wasn't. They didn't know. They didn't say. Well, we know now is what they were practicing, but it was a big thing. I remember that.
I've never heard of that, but seeing, I believe it is practiced. Then we have earth divination. This has to do with geographic features that's with the earth. And it says here, one of the examples, it says, take a piece of paper and a pencil and make a whole bunch of dots on it. If you believe in this earth divination, it's called geomancy. And if you've done the dot and pencil work right, you may find the answer to your question's predictions about the future lies somewhere in the configuration of the dots you put on the paper. It says to try an older version of geomancy, throw some dirt down and find information about the future and where the particles land. The term also refers to divination by geographical features. For example, what's the big one? Stonehenge. That's a divination, geographical location, structure that's used for divination. And we could just go on and on and on about things that are used geographically on the Earth's surface that we use for divination. Can anybody think of another one? Is there anything in Mississippi that's legend? No, I do.
Not Wyatt, but that's not really
But I do
about
know.
divination.
But I do know in Indiana, there's several locations in southern Indiana where there were trees that were used for divination, and we were forbidden as a church to go down that road, or to go that part of it. It was by a small creek. We were forbidden to go there, and if we knew we went there, we got prayed over because the tree had gained notoriety over the decades, or how it was very old at that time. That'd be back in the 50s, early 60s. And that just being near that tree could cause a disruption of your life. So it was geographically located in a place like that.
There's something in Hawaii about black rocks. There must be a deviation.
Yeah.
That
If you take from the beach some of the black sand or black rocks, you'll have bad luck.
bad omen.
And what's another thing that people gather off of the beach, and when lightning strikes the beach,
Right.
Lightning glass?
it strikes and it makes a formation. There was a love story in this movie about that, where they gathered these crystals that were formed by lightning that struck the beach.
Well, the lightning melts the silica of the sand,
And
which
turns
is
it into a
practically
glass crystal like
Yeah.
highly collectible and very, supposedly very spiritual to find it. Yeah, life changing. And then we got gyromancy. You know what a gyro is. And that's divination, which involves dancing, walking, hopping, jumping, spinning in circles in a pattern to gain insight and answers to questions, and it prognosticates from the place where you stop dancing or you fall. Of course, gyro means ring, spiral, circle. It's not like a gyro sandwich either.
I'm not sure that's the best picture for that, because for Sufis it's really more a form of prayer.
And what is prayer?
Well, it's not divination, it's more worship.
What is prayer? Let's talk about this, because prayer is very important. It's a part of prayer is a divination. Why is it a divination? Because in the scope we're talking about.
That's why I said worship rather than, there's different kinds of prayer. Worship is more.
Why do you worship? Why do we have such a fixation on a higher power? Especially in America, we can focus on it. It's worldwide, but why do we have a fixation on a higher power and what a higher power can do for us if we yield to the higher power, either by prayer or by worship or by just a personal relationship? And it doesn't have to be necessarily a God or a spiritual. It can be anything. Mother Nature was. I readily yield myself to Mother Nature, into nature, because it's my higher power. How does that affect me? What do I get from Mother Nature? What does she say to me? What does she speak to me? She speaks volumes, and I can't understand all that she speaks to me. I just don't understand. But she just happens to be what I have focused on as my higher power. It could be God, and these Sufis practice this because it alters their human existence at the moment and transcends where they're at. And they'll tell you, if you read about Sufis when they've done this for hours on end, that they are in a different spiritual level. Now, I use this in Pentecostals because I came from a very wild Pentecostal background, and they used to do this all the time, especially men and women would spin in circles. They would run the aisles for hours, just run around the church, run around the church, run around the church, seeking for a touch of the Holy Spirit, to be enlightened, to be uplifted, to be energized. So, but then you can, did you have something to say? But then you can do this. It's not just spinning in circles, but it has to do with the human body and how we can do it by walking. And a lot of people, especially in the Buddhist religion, can walk. It's called walking meditation. And you can walk and actually alter. People do alter their spirit, their attitude, by just walking and being calm. Have you ever been to a garden where they have a path that's laid out and you walk it? And you find the power as you get closer to the center. If you've done it right, you find a divine presence, for speaking of word. Laying down anything. Meditation is another form of this, where you relax your body. It has to do with the body and how you deal with it. That's interesting, isn't it? And prayer is another way to do it too. In Pentecostal church, sometimes they would pray. They would, if there was some need, they wanted to change a person, get a person healed, or change an outcome, someone in jail, or a divorce, or whatever. They would call for a prayer chain. And they would pray for hours on end, sometimes days at length. And it would be like tag team. Sometimes they would pray as long as you wanted to, 12 hours at a time, and then someone would come and you would touch them, and they would then start praying. And they would do that for days on end to accomplish a miracle. A miracle. Of course, we've talked about water. But the movements of water, the ocean, the tides, the waves. Some people sit on the ocean and they get divination by watching the waves. Have you ever heard of that? And by, of course, creeks and rivers and rain and a glass of water. The way the water moves and how objects that you throw in the water respond to the water. Stones. Of course, this goes back to early, as far back as we can remember in human existence. The power that people give it to stones, precious objects, gems, stones, different shapes. I'll share a story, but this week I'm really going through a personal change in a spiritual change. And it seems like all the things that I've gathered in my life, I've gathered them and I've not thrown them away. And I have a whole, above my desk I have a shelf. And I have things that I've gathered over the years. But they were on my shelf, and I think it was Monday of this week. And I get up early, I do my best thinking when I get up early, like 4:30. I have to get up because my dogs get me up, actually. The cat gets me up. But I get up, and so I sit down at my desk, and I usually listen to a poem or I listen to a uplifting song. But I was looking at all those objects on that shelf, and you know what? They all fell together. Over the years, I don't pick up a lot of stones on the ground. But over the last 40 years, since I was married to my husband, I just started picking up stones. And over the years, I've picked up stones and I've kept them. So I took and I had them in a jar. I've got different sizes and shapes and mysteries, and I don't know what they all are. But I took them out and I counted them. And there's 12 stones. So I set them up like a clock. And I have all these things that I've gathered, different things that I've set up that they've come together to have spiritual meaning to me. And I set them up on my desk in a clockbook, and then I have other things. I have a scorpion, a black scorpion that my husband brought back from Turkey. And it looks real. It's about the size of these glasses. And it's in a striking position, black as you can't, unless you see it. I used to be really frightened when I couldn't see it, and he would keep it on the shelf. I'd walk in the living room and be there because you see it on the corner of your eye. But I kept that scorpion, and so that scorpion, I won't go into detail, but that scorpion gave me some magical thoughts, and I'm using that in my... Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I haven't figured this out, but I have about 12, 13, 14 different items, including my group of stones that I use, and I'm using them. I don't know what it's called. What's it called when you make a circle, and then you set up a pattern of focus on it, and you set it down, each stone means something.
Like a mandala?
Like a mandala?
Mandala?
Well, mandalas, they do that with sand. Yes, because when I do, then I take it apart, put it back, and I have a sense of belonging to all those things, all those years that are in those objects. I have a sense, that's my immediate sense, but I don't know. We'll talk about that later, because I do want to get your input. Maybe I'll share that later once I get a little bit more. But stones are a crucial part of this for me, and the stones I picked up. I thought it was interesting that all these years I've only picked up 12 stones, and 12 is such an important number to me anyway. Now we're talking about one that I have no idea. I think that, what I always say. I tell you what, let's go to dreams, because I want to come back to the other one in a minute. But dreams are, we talked about those, somebody talked about dreams. But dreams are so important. And does anyone here actually give dream readings? Anybody? I don't know what a person does, interprets dreams or reads fortunes in dreams. don't even know what to call them. But does anybody know how people that use hypnotism to get into the subconscious? Because dreams are nothing more than a visit of our mind to the subconscious. But hypnotism, and we use drugs to do it. Plants, certain plants. Who was talking about mushrooms? Who was talking about mushrooms at the other time?
Lisa has been out trying to find certain mushrooms.
There's a good example that put us into a dream state where we can interpret, if we want to, what's into a subconscious. Is that dangerous or not? Is that anybody know anybody that does that? There's really warnings about doing that.
What, mushrooms?
No, not mushrooms, but going into the subconscious.
It just depends on the ability of the person, I think.
Think you're right. Okay, now, and I'm going to go quick to letters and numbers. Now, I got more than I want. I'm going to call it the dream, but I want to go back to conjuring here. I'm about to go on it. The conjuring is probably the most that puts the fear in most people who do not know about divination. And conjuring, it's different in different societies, different periods of history, and it's come a long ways. And some societies, some practitioners are into it really heavily, and others just do it, flippantly. Like they say, "Oh yes, I hear the voice of my grandma on her deathbed. I hear her voice in my mind, and she told me to say this." They flippantly say that and believe it to the people that actually sit and actually call. Yes, you are more experienced at that, maybe than anybody at this table. And but is conjuring even the right word?
That's a good description of it.
Pardon?
It's a good description of it. Some people call it necromancy.
Yeah, that's summoning spirits or apparitions or visions for the purpose of divination.
I would put conjuring in a realm of not just the dead, but spirits in general. You know, like all kinds of spirits, where necromancy would be more like dead people.
Okay, so tell me the difference, just for my information. When you conjure, wouldn't the spirit that you call be the spirit of the dead person, or are you talking about a literal appearance of the dead person? Is that, it's not just their spirit, but be the actual dead person themselves? The body?
Not the body, no.
Okay, well, I don't understand. So when you conjure,
Just the spirit of the
spirit.
person, yeah.
And it would be an apparition or a vision, or what is it?
It's different for different people. Some people hear, like you were saying, you hear the voice, or some people can see spirits. Some people, they communicate with songs or phrases like that. Some people get pictures of things, like little mini videos will play of scenarios and stuff. It's different depending on who's doing it.
Okay, well, I'm going to close this here. But what I want to do is I want to go and look at this. It's about 12 minutes long, so it's not a. And yeah, if you've ever seen TEDx or TED Talks, they're not very long, and they're quite interesting.
Before you start that, I did want to say, I had remembered after you told us what this was going to be about, I remembered a couple of things. I've heard of automatic writing before. It's not something I'd ever tried, but I did have this experience one time where I went from just writing in a journal to, it's like I almost started moving into a sort of ecstatic state. I started praising God, just giving thanks, and I was writing about it, and then all of a sudden I got a bit of a shock because, mentally, I mean, because it was almost like I wasn't coming up with trying to say, well, what do I want to say or how do I want to pray? It was just kind of there, and then all of a sudden there started to be like a statement. There was this, like this I am statement, and it was not something that came from my conscious mind, and it's not something I would ever have thought was true of me as a person. So
that's like streaming. When you stream, you ask people to stream, you can talk and stream.
stream of
And you can write and
consciousness.
stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, that's part of divination. I'm sure that's part of divination. People can use it as that. Has anybody ever used that?
Autographia?
Graphia.
Well, when I was having trouble mentally as a younger person, I was diagnosed with what's called hypographic, which is compulsion to write. And I read some very interesting studies about hypergraphia and the perceived supernatural world. And according to these studies, less than 5% of people who are diagnosed hypographic are aware of what they're writing. And most don't recognize the voice, the words, or things like that that they have written. And I've always found that interesting. Because
And you're an automatic writer.
Because at some point in
Less than 5% do know what they're writing?
do know
Huh.
what
So
they're
that means the majority don't.
The majority have no idea what they've written. And majority of those don't even recognize the voice, words, or reason of what they've written. So, meaning against their own taught beliefs, against their own original perceptions, including my own writing in the past. I've had my writing not be what my taught beliefs were at the time. Because remember, I was quite young at that time. I was only 18.
How did
And
you
you're-
feel?
this
Do you
is
remember how you
specifically
felt after
people-
that experience? Those experiences?
Gone, but it was also during the time frame when I was already suffering from mental illness, so it was a struggle anyway.
So
Well,
this
you know
is
that-
specifically that
Autographia
condition that you're talking about where
versus
you're
hypergraphia.
compelled to.
Well, that's not too far different from Pentecostals who speak in tongues from the Spirit.
Well, that's actually where I was discussing it with someone else who was in a group with me at the time who was Pentecostal, and they had said, well, that's the same as speaking in tongues, and I was like, no, because when you speak in tongues, you don't know what you say. I could read what I said. The problem is that it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, sometimes people, knowing what I know about Pentecostal glossolalia or speaking in tongues, is sometimes it's known to somebody who interprets it, and other times it's just for the person's benefit, or
Yeah.
the person who's speaking it. So that's very divination oriented.
I felt like at the time that it was, but I
And
also
if you would
think-
say that to them, they would say, oh no, it's not like if a witch was doing it. Why would they say it's different? Because a witch is speaking from whom? The devil.
But, well, I came from a culture who believed in lost souls, and lost souls are lost from birth. It doesn't matter what they do. They're going to hell anyway.
Yes.
You can call them whatever the hell you want to call them. They're going to go to hell.
But that's how people,
What is that
blacken
called?
Those are cages.
There's a word for that.
Old souls.
No, there's a religion that uses that word. What is that word? Where they're predestined. That's the-
Predestination.
There's certain religions or people that believe, regardless of what you do, you're predestined, you're going to go to hell.
Well,
If you believe in
I have
hell.
an interesting story. I don't necessarily tell her how it came about. The way I describe it is that God had to trick me into getting me to go down. The one and only time I've ever felt called to go down an aisle, I never ever wanted to. When they were calling for it, never had an inclination in
So
church.
where were you?
And one time I did when I was in Houston.
Where were you?
When it happened in Houston at Lakewood Church.
Oh, Lakewood, is that a Pentecostal church?
No, they're not denominational, but they're not Pentecostal, but, they don't make speaking in tongues part of the service generally, but sometimes they do have a time to let people who do that do it. And occasionally they would have, usually in the evening, not on a Sunday morning, they would feel like, okay, they would have gather people that knew how to help other people learn how to do it. They would have them at the front, and then they would go into this side room if you felt called to do that. Now, I did not hear I had no interest in the speaking in tongues part. I heard something else, and I felt a real thing in here to get up and go. And a few steps down the aisle, all of a sudden it said, with the sign of speaking in tongues, and I stopped. And I was like, all right, God, it seems like you were calling me down, so I'm going to go down there, but I don't know about this. and I went into the side room later. I had the prayer, and something started coming, but it was very garbled, and it scared the crap out of me, and I wouldn't even practice it by myself. But then they had another speaker come another time, and a well-known TV preacher given like a seminar, not a seminar, but preaching, and she had people, she said, anyone who wants to, I have my assistant over there after the service, you can go. And I said, okay, God, if this was real and it's something you want me to do, then show me. And I went and I sat in the little bleachers. While I was sitting there, it was like something came up straight out of my gut and up my spine, like a river just flowed out, and it was clear as a bell. And ever since then, I've been able to do it at will.
Do what?
Speaking in tongues.
Just hold on to that thought. And after this man gives his talk, we'll revisit what you're saying. Okay?
I don't do it much.
Do you want me to show you how to make that big again?
Yeah, so I'm not make that big again. I answered for them.
Okay, let's see.
I'm gonna restart it because
Might want to turn it up too.
yeah, the volume's low here.
Whole screen?
Okay.
Like that?
Let's see if we can get the volume up.
You can close this right here.
We can Bluetooth your computer to my speaker.
You got your speakers with
Oh,
you?
yeah.
Oh, I think that would be wonderful. Because
Yeah.
She knows how to do that part.
Can you rewind?
Yes. Well, boy, that's old school.
What?
Rewind.
Please be kind and rewind.
That's what the symbol
And Blockbuster.
Even though there's nothing to actually wind anymore. Yeah. What do they call it now? Have they changed the name?
What's the terminology now?
A different terminology. Well, we get older and older.
Now
we
if
get-
I know.
So cool. Did you fix that? Did you fix that?
It was delicious.
Thank you.
So that's bacon pasta.
It's bacon noodles.
Bacon noodles, okay.
I know it was good.
Is sugar in it? I'm gonna have to put sugar in my next one. And no ground meat.
Lots of sugar, lots of
Who
vinegar.
is this guy?
Huh?
Pennsylvania
You'll know
Dutch.
everybody.
Huh?
Pennsylvania Dutch. We use sugar and vinegar and everything.
Sorry.
I love anything
Okay,
kosher.
there we go.
Ain't gonna have much of a Dutch stitch if it ain't got vinegar
Huh?
in it. Vinegar.
It tastes what?
Everything. Vinegar.
You said something like a Dutch stick or what?
A Dutch dish. It's not much of a
Not
Dutch
without
dish without
vinegar.
vinegar.
That's like my macaroni salad. It doesn't have a lot of dinner in it.
Yeah, weird feeling when I'm touching these. I need to stop.
Speakers on.
Do some divination with your size. Throw something out on the table. Throw some coin down on the table and get a reading.
You probably could have just hit the volume buttons on the TV and turned it up.
Well,
I
I
imagine.
have a,
His volume was all the way up.
Yeah, but I mean on the TV itself, like turn the actual TV up.
You little hijack.
there we go. Now we probably don't need it.
Put it on.
How many spiritualists does it take to work a computer?
Try it like that.
I wish I could have remembered the joke when you were talking earlier about the biblio, whatever.
Spies argue that the Romans would later use to dominate the
Okay,
entire
here we go.
region.
Okay, everybody can hear it?
Yeah.
Do you want me to show you the?
Now make it big again.
Tell me if it's too loud.
The year is 480 BC. The Persians had mounted an army of 300,000 men, the largest in history up till that time. This is a size army that the Romans would later use to dominate the entire Mediterranean. The leader of the Persians, Xerxes, a man of such stature during his time that even people of other nations referred to him simply as the king, had decided to launch the full fury of his force against a single city, Athens. The situation in Athens was serious. The Athenians figured that if anyone could come up with a solution to this particular problem, though, it may well be them. They were, after all, renowned for their ingenuity and their rational intellects. They had recently invented democracy and tragedy, and within a decade would see the birth of Socrates and philosophy as we know it. So they did what any rational people would do in such a situation. They deliberated. They gathered information. They used rules of logic to draw inferences. They used public debate to test their conclusions. And with careful arguments, they considered their courses of action. After grinding away on it, they did what any rational group of people would do at that time. They sent away for an oracle. The Pythia was the most authoritative oracle of the day. She was an aging, frail, illiterate woman housed in the massive stone temple at Delphi. She took questions from her petitioners, and she dispensed answers in the form of riddles. The Athenian answer was grim. But there was one small glimmer of hope. The Pythia said that only a wooden wall will remain unconquered. The embassy took this riddle back to their city, and a debate which had been meandering in many different directions quickly crystallized around two potential options. Either hole up in the traditional stronghold of the Acropolis, which had been surrounded by a wooden fence, or use wood to build a navy to take on Xerxes at sea and cut off his supply lines. The second course of action prevailed, and Athens survived and thrived. Now, we might wonder, why did they do this? Why did they rely on an oracle? Why did they imagine, especially this group of people that was an emblem for rational thinking, why did they imagine that a person with no knowledge base could provide any pertinent insight into their situation? And this was no aberration. The Greeks were in the habit of turning to oracles and also used many other techniques when they ran up to the limits of their own rational thinking. They were interested in the instinctual behaviors of animals like the flight paths and screeches of birds. They were interested in their dreams, and they spent time examining the pulsating entrails of the animals they sacrificed to their gods. They called it the study of divine signs, or divination. Seems like strange behavior, yes? Well, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try to persuade you of two things. Number one, it wasn't strange, and number two, you still do it. My field is classics, the study of Greece and Rome, and when scholars of my discipline take on this question, they typically pull out two kinds of answers. Number one comes from the vantage of social history. It's imagined that what we have is an elite group that has a strategy, and they use the ostentatious mystery of divine signs in order to persuade the masses to come their way. They form consensus, and they manage dissent. But there's a problem for this idea. The problem is that most situations of divination, despite our example, were not relevant to politics. Most had to do with matters of personal and even intimate concern. Should I be involved in a business deal with this person? Should I take a trip on this day? Should I marry this man? These things had nothing to do with the dynamic between the elite and the masses. There's a further problem, which is, according to all the evidence that we have, even in situations of politics, the elites thought it worked just as much as the masses did. So if the elites were pulling the wool over anyone's eyes, they were pulling the wool over their own lives as well. Doesn't quite hold up. Another kind of explanation comes out, and it starts from the idea of superstition. We're told that primitive brains are superstitious, and the corollary is that ours aren't. And they're prone to exotic theological commitments, and so they believe in strange things. But there's a problem with this line of thinking as well. While that may well be a part of the behavior of divination, it doesn't necessarily explain the behavior of divination. While superstition may have something to do with it, it doesn't necessarily lead to the behaviors that we see in divination. It's not as though when there's a sufficient amount of superstition in the air, all of a sudden people think that the universe is coursing with hidden messages that are readable by these techniques. A final kind of explanation, which is the category of no explanation, suggests that, well, lots of people do weird things and cultures have strange beliefs, so may well be no explanation. It's just a weird Mediterranean behavior, and we've grown out of that kind of thing, thank goodness. There's a problem here as well, though. It wasn't just the Greeks who did this kind of thing. In fact, all ancient cultures for which we have evidence, from the southern tip of Africa to northern Britannia, and from eastern to western Eurasia, were in the habit, when they ran up against the limits of their rational thinking, to turning to techniques that took over for them and allowed them to advance their problems. The techniques vary. The Chinese took tortoise shells and put them in fire and then read the cracks that happened afterwards. But the structure of thinking is the same. If we're going to propose that this is some kind of mass delusion, we need some explanation for why the mass delusion is so consistent across human cultures that had functionally nothing to do with one another in many different areas of the world. Superstition is a very weak answer. Now, in my work on the arcane past, things took the most important turn for me when I took a brief tour into the present time, a time I don't spend that much time in. It's strange and bizarre for me. I spent a year with a team of researchers at the Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. This is mainly a group of cognitive scientists, evolutionary biologists, and behavioral psychologists who are pushing the envelope of understanding of the complexities of our cognitive lives. Most of us, and I surely at the time, have a standard picture of how our brains work. We set out on a problem, we direct our awareness to it, we self-consciously gather facts, and using logical rules, we draw inferences, we reach conclusions that then motivate our actions. Let's call this discursive thinking. But this is only part of the story. The researchers at the center were expanding this view and opening up fields that I would call non-discursive thinking, things that don't quite answer to that description of the way our brains work. And some of the pieces that they were coming on were ringing bells for me, struck me as very familiar. One scholar was working on face-to-face conversations. He looked at how we continuously and unselfconsciously process nonverbal cues in our conversation partners, and that these shape the top-level thinking that emerges from such events. The oracular consultation was famously interactive, the bell is ringing in my head, and someone even without a knowledge base may well discern from just seeing how a person reacts to different suggestions what the most useful one is going to be in a particular situation. Another kind of scientist was studying the phenomenon of thin slicing. This is a claim that our snap judgments are sometimes as good, and for some things better than, our most careful deliberative processes. The examination entrails instantly came to mind for me. In situations like this, often in the heat of battle, where a debate is coursing around from many different pieces, taking into account many different pieces of information, the cutting open of a live animal, usually a large one, has a way of focusing people's attention. And focusing on the splayed innards of another animal interrupts the conversation. While the diviner is staring at that, it's imagined the diviner comes up with a snap judgment, not a considered decision. And while rule books for such things were legendary in antiquity, none of them survive. And I think none of them ever existed. It's not about applying rules to a particular situation. It's about making a snap judgment in the heat of the moment. There were also scholars at the center who were working at laying out the strong gains that people accrue when they're dealing with complex problems after they've been grinding it out for a while, to set their attention on something else for a while and allow their non-conscious minds to advance the problem. Their non-conscious minds have power and can advance the problem. When they return to it later, things look different and clearer than they did before. Nearly all the techniques of antiquity did this kind of a thing. As an historian of ideas, this got me to thinking, discursively, I think. And I was interested now in looking at non-discursive thinking historically. Over time, there are different manifestations of this. In the contemporary period, we usually, in polite company anyway, we use the term intuition to describe these things. We may well refer to the famous phrase of Malcolm Gladwell, thinking without thinking. A century and a half ago, in the wake of Darwin, in the middle of the 19th century, when physiology was the queen of the sciences, there was a different way of talking about it. These scientists were fascinated by the reflex action that they could observe in the musculature of our bodies, and they proposed that there were congruent kinds of actions happening in our thinking. They called this unconscious cerebration. 2 centuries before that, the English poet John Milton has the archangel Raphael explain to Adam in the Garden of Eden that the creatures of the universe think in 2 different ways. There is discursive thinking, which is what humans mostly do. And then he says there's something else called intuition, which is mostly the way angels think. On occasion, humans get a chance to think like angels, but it happens rarely. This opened up a whole new vantage on Greek divination for me. It started to look less like an outlier and more like the tale of a long and consistent arc of human cognitive history that attested to a core human experience. We oftentimes find ourselves in a situation of knowing things without knowing quite how we know them. This led me to propose an axiom. Here's my axiom. Our ability to know exceeds our capacity to understand that ability. Let me repeat. Our ability to know exceeds our capacity to understand that ability. And if it's true, as an axiom, it held in the past, it holds good now, and even despite the ingenious work of our cognitive scientists, it will hold into the future. We will remain to some degree mysterious to ourselves. The axiom tells us that there will be surplus knowledge. Surplus knowledge is provocative, it provokes some accounting for it, and by the axiom, that accounting won't be exactly right, but that accounting needs to be culturally useful. So back to the ancient world, I gained a different kind of perspective on what they were up to after spending time with these cognitive scientists. When they took time out of their deliberative thinking to change focus on a puzzling riddle, cracks in a tortoiseshell, or the erratic flight paths or screeches of a bird, they were engaging in their own local variant of the culturally authorized techniques for opening a space for non-discursive thinking to happen. This was not an example, mainly, of them engaging in exotic theological commitments because of superstitious brains. It was not an example of them trying to manipulate the masses with ostentatious mystery. That's not why they did this. They did this because it worked. Our non-conscious brain has power, and they had ways of putting it to use. And finishing back up into the present time, my claim that you do this kind of thing? Well, whenever you're facing a multivariable question over a complex data set in a situation you really care about and you need to take a break, chances are you probably do something. You clean your desk, you take a walk, you take a shower, you sleep on it. These are our culture's authorized forms for opening up a break in discursive thinking and allowing our unself-conscious, non-discursive mind to take over for a while. According to our best authorities today, this improves our chances of making headway, and according to the authorities from antiquity, whom I must say I trust a little bit more, you should definitely do this. You may well defeat a great empire. Thank you.
So, are we in the right space? Of course we are. Why are we in the right space? Because everyone does it. It's human to practice divination. And we do it because we help each other. And it's just, there's so many variables, or so many divination avenues, that there's not one right, there's not one wrong, but they all serve their purpose. So, I'm proud to be associated with people who are so concerned about their fellow humans that, and you know, like he said, and I've experienced it when I understand what he said, there are moments where I've thought about a problem or an issue so hard that I could not make a decision. So what did I do? You know, I go to church and have them pray for me. Which then I just gave it over to them, and they became my diviners. And sometimes I got the answer, a lot of times I did get the answer, because I didn't think about it. I gave it to them to make the decision for me. And like he said, it might have been of the person who's divining, it might be a snap judgment on their part. But then, who knows? That's where the mystery comes in. Maybe they do know something about you, because there's something between us. You sit down and go to a fortune teller, and they look at you deeply, and you can feel it. Like my aunt, she would look sometimes at me. I'm going to use her to death, but that's she's the only really diviner that I knew of. But she would grab my hand like this, just grab it, hold on and squeeze it hard. And she looked me right in the eye. This is when I was in my teens. Sometimes she frightened me, but she'd always say something to me that was what I was thinking about, or help me make a decision. What do you think?
I know that there are absolute limits to rational thinking, or what he was calling discursive thinking. It can lead you around in circles, wind up right back where you were, without ever coming to a conclusion sometimes. So,
but again, the point is that that's why we seek out diviners. You know, because we can't. And who do we trust? Who can we trust? Can we trust our church? Can we trust?
It's a huge issue.
Our go to an astrologer or horoscope reader or anybody else. And you're going to be doing a program here in a week or two. When is that date that you're going to have your people come in and do some?
June 15th.
June the 15th?
I do believe.
June
I
15th.
thought it was 16th.
Could you?
Saturday.
Yeah, I got it on my calendar.
15th.
June 15th.
Could you give us in a nutshell what that's going to be about?
It's basically a seance, but where it's in an espiritismo setting that has more checks and balances than a normal seance would.
And by seance, you're meaning, how do you interpret a seance?
Well, I think a run-of-the-mill seance would be, everybody sits around a table, holds hands, and, we want to contact JFK or something. A misa is based around your spiritual development. So it is meant to mediumship and contact the spirits and ancestors that walk with the people who are attending the misa and give them messages that will hopefully help them and progress their development.
And so you have a leader who guides you.
There'll be two of us, but Matt will be the leader.
Will you be one of them?
Yes, there always has to be two. But I've only ever done one misa, so this is helping my development, as well, where he's going to be the main.
How many's ever been to a misa meeting? Anybody? So what would you recommend? Because I'm thinking about coming, I don't know, because I can't drive at night, I'd have to limit my participation, but you did say it could. Of course, I've been to everything in my Pentecostal background fits so neatly into what you're doing, because there were times we'd go to church at 7 o'clock and we wouldn't quit until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because we'd get into spiritual space that nobody wanted to leave, and we were feeding off of the energy of each other so much people actually didn't look at the clock, didn't pay attention to time. So, but I understand. So what can we...
Well, misas cannot begin until it's dark.
Until it's dark, okay.
Right.
So,
it depends. It depends on who wants to talk, who comes through, how long the messages are. It can last anywhere from 4 to 12 hours.
Well, for my information, could I come early? Because it's getting, the hours are getting longer. Come early and maybe meet people, early arrivers?
Yeah, we're going to have a meal before Misa begins, so everybody's welcome. I'm going to cook some ribs on the grill, and we'll have some food, and everybody can hang out and chat and before Misa
that's
starts.
What I would do but I have this, but like I say, I have some limitations to travel at night because of my vision. But
What you would be welcome to, like, I only have one guest room, which Matt would be staying in, but you could stay on my couch. If if it would go real late, you could sleep on the couch.
I appreciate the offer, but I am one of these people. I seldom go on vacation because I don't like to be away from my bed.
Okay. I'm just
I have
offering.
in my bed. I have a.
What if I pick you up at your house, drive us to there, and then I drive you back home afterward? That way, if it's dark, it's not.
Well, let me think about it. Let me think about it. But what? So we can come. But once, and if I read it right, once it begins, you don't want people to
Coming or leaving. Yeah, you
coming
have
or
to.
leaving. That's,
right.
See, that's a.
Once it begins, you're there, and you shouldn't even get up to go to the bathroom unless you really have to.
I'll insert catheters for anybody that needs one.
Okay, this is.
I'm trying to help myself.
Have you ever been one in this region?
Have I what?
Has there ever been an activity like this in this region?
Just the ones I've done.
So you've had them before here in Laurel?
At my house, yeah.
At your house, okay.
How many have you had?
One. Yeah.
Okay.
And this is your second one.
This will
and
be my
this will
second
be
one.
for your development.
So because
I mean, it's also for my development, but it's for the community's development is what
Right.
the purpose of it.
Well, can we make this be our June meeting then, and not do one here?
That'd be all right. Well, we have to get an agreement. We've got some people that I've contacted, or that's contacted me saying, one lady that lives in Jackson, or up in that area, and one lady that lives in up around Tupelo, no, not Tupelo, where one of the other churches is, up in that area, up towards Oxford, up in that area, that if she would take off, if she knew, she has a full calendar in June, and if she knew the date in June, she would make a special trip down here. But it's what the will of the group is. It doesn't matter to me.
I mean, I wouldn't say that a misa should take place of a gathering like
because
this.
we're an eclectic group.
Right.
We're people who have different disciplines, and it may not.
And some of us are people working 50 and more hours a week, so.
Well, you understand what I'm saying. Certain people who are pagans. Some people who, like a little girl that was here, she was Viking. She was Nordic, believing. And then we have people who are spiritual naturalists. They respect it all, but and if we will encourage the membership and let you advertise to the membership to come be a part of it. If nothing else, from my point of view, it would be a good experience for me to just, and who knows where it would lead.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
I always say you come to misa with no expectations.
Right.
And
well,
you
come
might come
with
out,
no expectations.
right, you might come out with some amazing revelations, or you might not.
But I'm having some, but in my life right now, I'm having some movement. I can't explain what it is, but movement into the spiritual realm. So.
I have only opened this misa up to members
Right.
of this group. I was going to share it wider because I also run the Hattiesburg Witches and Pagans group and stuff. And I was going to open it up and not yet. I'm just opening it up to...
What is the pushback there? Or is there pushback, or it's just not the right spirit you feel?
I think it will be able to be opened up to more people at some point, just not at this point.
I see. So is that group open to fellowship with us, or are they more independent-minded people?
I don't know. I've never invited anyone because...
do you have a good turnout in Hattiesburg?
There's a lot of people in the group.
Where do you meet?
I don't think we've never met up or anything like that.
Oh, you've never met up?
No, it's just like a Facebook group.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do they have a main focus, or see, we're eclectic. If you believe in spirituality, paganism, witchcraft, you're welcome as a person in that discipline. Any discipline, we don't care. come and
I
just
mean,
enjoy love and
I can
respect.
post, the next meeting or whatever in that group and see if
They
more,
certainly would be
you know,
welcome
they
here
wanna
if
come.
they wanted to, and so
I just
'cause
didn't want to. I didn't want to do that without a consensus
Well, what
that
do you
was
think?
okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason we didn't jump into your group to begin was we didn't know about it.
We didn't know it was
you.
existed.
We didn't know another page.
We didn't know. We
And
thought we were the only people. We knew that there had to be witches, pagans, etc. out there in the hinterlands, but we weren't hearing from them. They weren't, and so we just didn't. We just struck out and said, let's just open the door and say, it's going to be a fellowship. It's not going to. We're not going to encourage any particular discipline or any practice. But whatever you practice, just come as a human being and share it. And exactly like this guy here talked here, that what we want to share is the common human experience of divination that's obviously inherent in human beings worldwide. How encouraging is that? We're not so strange after all. So, anyway, well, that was our presentation today, and I felt.
Did you figure out how to do the link and send it
No,
to the
but we'll get it.
Facebook so we could?
We'll get it taken care of, and we'll send it. Make sure you get it.
Okay.
Well, I recorded it, so if you want me to share it in the talk, I can share it in the group.
Okay, that would be nice. Yeah, and tell them we don't bite. And we're just common people who are trying to find
I
it.
know,
I wonder how many
some people might not be completely out of the closet. They might not,
Well, see, that's the
so I
problem.
didn't want to.
We thought that would be the problem. People are just, and witches particularly, are a very closed group, just for the nature of their practice.
Well, then look where we're at. I mean, you can have
well, that's for sure.
right.
Yeah, look where we are. And all it takes, and you talk about this, what we talked about, a lady who, they wouldn't let her in, she ran this shop like in Hattiesburg and the one in Laurel, where they sell these goods that, the people that are in divination purchase for luck or good fortune or whatever. They immediately say, oh, that insults my religion as a Christian, and I don't want them to have any rights to have a right in my community, and push that lady out, claiming she was a witch. See how easy it is for people who are closed-minded.
Especially in here, because we're in the Bible Belt.
Well, yeah, they all they need to do is say she's
Just
a
so I
witch.
verified with the group.
Y'all ever get that person that says to you, I don't care what you are as long as you're not a witch?
As long as you're not a witch.
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
but I can
it
believe
stops
people
me in
say
my
that.
tracks.
Well, I know people say, I don't care what you, I have an uncle who said, I don't care what you're when you're not homosexual.
Yeah, same concept.
So.
See, but I'm the kind of butthead, even as a younger person, I would have been like, yes, I am, even though I wasn't. Yes,
Yeah.
I am, even if I'm not. Oh, you've got a problem with that group? That's what I am. You got a problem with black? Look how black. I've said that one.
Well, my friend that's coming up from New Orleans, he's gay, and he is just fabulous. I just love him to death. He's amazing.
What was the movie where they said, well, Spartacus, stand up. And what do they start doing? I am Spartacus. And everybody stood up. I am Spartacus. I am Spartacus. So the whole legion stood up there and stood with Spartacus. That's how it works, you see. You stand up for each other. And not be ashamed of it. So I am, as a personal, just close on a personal note, because, and the reason why I leave usually at 4:30 is because my
You
son.
always leave us early.
You know why? It's
Yeah.
because my son, we have, ever since I've been here for 6 years, he cooks special suppers on Sunday nights.
This is not Sunday, this is Saturday.
Saturdays and Sundays, he cooks.
Okay.
But Sunday nights too. But Saturday and Sunday, he always cooks. And I forgot what he's having tonight, some kind of shrimp Creole he's cooking.
Okay.
And he cooks all day, and that's kind of, it's become a bond for us. We have a history of my children and I being gay, and it's a long story, but it makes for an interesting chapter in the book. But I moved down here to bond with my 2 grown boys, and my oldest one, he's gay. That's one bond, but we're working on.
Is your oldest one the one that cooks for you?
Yeah. He's gay, but we're bonding, and so that was on my bucket list to get that done. So I guess if you get to know me and I get to know you, I get to know more about you, your personal lives. What did you experience that made you the person that you are? The wonderful person that you are. You know, the person that we can learn to respect and love and talk about things. You know what I'm saying? Nothing wrong with